All right, everybody. Listen, it is not a controversial opinion in most spheres of adult internet conversation to say that TikTok fucking sucks. The trends from TikTok suck. The big users from TikTok tend to suck. The politics of TikTokers, both left and right, tend to suck. It's like the worst of the right and the worst of the left distilled into short form, consolidated content. Made to get as much engagement and clicks as possible. It's downright annoying and unpleasant to even deal with. So with that in mind, I think most of you, upon hearing of the idea of a TikTok ban bill, maybe felt a twinge of support, right? Like, even if you're aware of what it is now, even if you aren't really in favor of outright banning TikTok, you might have felt a little twinge of, TikTok kinda sucks though, and maybe we'd be better without it. Obviously, if TikTok got banned in the US, we would just see a massive spike in the amount of people using VPNs, I would imagine, rather than a massive drop in the amount of people using TikTok. Regardless, the TikTok ban bill is a bit of a distraction. It's not really just a TikTok ban. That's just sort of the bipartisan, popular, frontlining title they've given it in order to gain popular support. The idea behind it is that because TikTok was not sold by its parent company to a new parent company that is not China-based, that they're essentially arguing TikTok is a threat to national security. And while I do not agree with that claim necessarily, like that the platform is necessarily a threat to national security, I do think there is some merit to the concern for data collection by the app. Definitely merit for that concern, but they're essentially trying to use the popularity of hating on TikTok to push a bill that goes way further than just banning TikTok. We got a PBS NewsHour segment here that I believe breaks down everything quite well. And there's a lot of info about this that I think it's important to be knowledgeable about because this is not just a TikTok ban. Now, mind you, this bill has already passed. Like, it's passed. So let's find out what it entails.
Welcome to the NewsHour. The U.S. House voted overwhelmingly today to pass a bill that could ban TikTok here in the U.S. unless the app cuts ties with China. The bill now heads to the Senate, where its fate is, at the moment, unclear. Last night, we heard from the lead sponsors of the bill about why the legislation is necessary. Tonight, we hear from an opposing voice, and for that, we're joined by David Green, Civil Liberties Director and Senior Staff Attorney at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Mr. Green, thanks so much for being with us. And you, as I understand it, oppose...
I will say, the biggest thing about this bill that kind of upsets me is the fact that it's being made by the most tech-illiterate, out-of-touch people there are. And I consider myself quite tech-illiterate, but these are people that I don't think know what an HDMI cord is. Do you think Nancy Pelosi knows what an HDMI cable is? Seriously, if I asked her, hey, could you hand me an HDMI cable, she'd know what that means. Like, that's the cable you use to set up your TV, okay? That we're not talking anything really deep here, and these are the people behind making these laws. Here, let's very quickly, I want to bring up the Nancy Pelosi clip, the viral Nancy Pelosi clip. Nancy Pelosi TikTok. Here is a TikTok of Nancy Pelosi on TikTok.
This
Say that
is not
5 times fast.
an attempt to ban TikTok. It's an attempt to make TikTok better. Tic-tac-toe, a winner.
I'm gonna tic-tac jump out of a window. Nancy.
I'd expect there to be a guy responding to it, but yeah, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. That was pretty much 2024's Pokemon Go to the polls.
This bill on First Amendment grounds. We spoke last night with the lead sponsors of that legislation, as I mentioned, Congressman Gallagher and Krishnamurthy. And Congressman Krishnamurthy said of China's practices that there's no First Amendment right to espionage. There's no First...
Chat. When you consider how slim of a margin Hillary lost to Trump by, do you think it's possible the Pokemon Go to the polls quote, like that clip lost Hillary the election? I imagine very few people stopped supporting Hillary or refused to support her because of that, but if it had to have been some amount of people, possibly enough to have swung the election the other way, because of how slim of a margin Trump won by. I like to live in a world in my own head where the Pokemon Go to the polls clip was the pivotal moment where we could have not had Trump become president had she not said that. She would have won just barely.
Amendment right to harm our national security. Why is he wrong, in your view?
He's not thinking about the First Amendment rights of U.S. people who want to use TikTok and their right to communicate with each other through it and to receive information from TikTok in the way they receive it now.
If this bill passes the Senate, it is now a precedent that can be called to for the future banning of any platform the sitting presidential administration wants banned. So if Trump wins and Trump decides that Tumblr is too woke, he can just ban Tumblr. And once again, I know, fuck Tumblr, but also that's a level of power I don't think we want to normalize in the US government. Just unanimous power to ban a website from being accessed by Americans. What if Trump decides, we're banning all the porn websites? You know? I don't want to have to use a VPN to go on Pornhub.
U.S. people certainly have a right to use communications tools like TikTok to get information from them and to put out and to use them to disseminate their own information. So I understand that Representative Krishnamurthy is very concerned about the First Amendment rights of China, but that's really not what we're concerned about. We're concerned about the First Amendment rights of U.S. users.
Doesn't China present a special case? The FBI director, Christopher Wray, said that China is the defining threat of this generation, and the Chinese Communist Party requires Chinese companies to share information and user data upon request. That's the perceived threat that TikTok poses.
Well, that doesn't really make,
The problem is there's nothing special about TikTok. American companies and even other foreign companies collect a shitload of your data. It's literally the standard in the industry now. The idea that TikTok is uniquely bad in this respect is a little bit laughable. This feels more like an attempt to create a precedent the same. So you know what else had bipartisan support like this? You know what else had bipartisan unanimous support like this? The Patriot Act. There is one thing that the Democrats and the Republicans will always agree on and even work together on. The ability to set a precedent in which whoever is in power in the government, the government at a given time, is unable, what was I going to say? Fuck, I brain farted. I hate when I brain fart. God, I hate that I can't help but read your chat messages and you're all saying so much off-topic stuff. It always gets me. Damn it. Oh, I have to start turning off. I honestly have thought about turning off my chat during streams, to be honest. Man, I lost a good point I was getting to there as well. Oh, you guys got me so good. You ADHD'd me so hard. Oh, they're going to roast me for this one.
I defer to the FBI director on the threat.
Oh, yeah. No, okay, yeah. You guys big time distracted me. I remember now. Thank you, Delancer. Yeah, the Patriot Act. It had a whole bunch of bipartisan unanimous support because both sides will always work together and agree on reducing our freedoms and increasing the power the government has over us, because that's the one thing both sides agree on. So an issue like this is one of the very, very rare cases in which the Democrats and the Republicans sincerely, unanimously agree with each other, is tightening restrictions on Americans' freedoms. Broadly. Because the government is the government, and they want more power. That'll always be true.
Posed by China in particular, but I will note that China's not...
It's always called something that sounds nice, right? Like the Patriot Act, you know? or the TikTok ban bill, something that right now will get people to support it while the bill is going through the process of passing, so people don't go against it or get mad about it until it's too late. It's always got a title like the Patriot Act or the TikTok ban bill. Something unanimously approvable.
Unique in requiring its companies to provide information to them upon request. The U.S. does much of the same thing through national security letters and through surveillance conducted under Executive Order 12333. There's a whole congressional debate going on now about the proposed renewal of Section 702 surveillance. So the U.S. has many of these same tools. China is not unique among nations in requiring companies located in it to provide internet user data. Now, if China does pose some particular threats, the U.S. can react to it. The question is whether forcing the sale or banning this platform from operating as it currently operates is the properly tailored way of addressing that threat. And what we're saying is that it's not, or at least the government hasn't so far proven that it is.
They have targeted TikTok because it is one of the most unanimously divisive websites out there. A lot of people do not like TikTok who are older, and it's mostly young non-voters who are big on TikTok and make up the majority of its user base. So rallying against TikTok like this to support a bill that will give the sitting president more power, the sitting presidential administration more power over American freedoms, all the while convincing people that it's something good and broadly popular, it's very insidious. It's very insidious, this TikTok ban bill. It is not just a TikTok ban. They can theoretically ban anything in the future if this passes the Senate.
It hasn't talked about this law in terms of the First Amendment scrutiny and the specificity that the First
China is a buzzword for scaring Americans.
Amendment requires.
So what then would be a more appropriate solution?
Well, there's a few things. One of the reasons it's hard to talk about what a better solution would be is because the justification for this law keeps on changing. Up until yesterday, maybe, those who support this law have been very strongly saying that this law is not about the content on TikTok at all. This is all about just some national security threat that we can't really tell you about. That it's just dangerous for China to have all this data about U.S. users. I think what we saw from your interview yesterday and from a lot of the statements made on the floor today, that this is very much concerns about the content that U.S. users get from TikTok. We heard this yesterday. I believe Representative Kristen Murthy talked about how how in China they get content about healthy living and STEM education, and in the United States it's about drug paraphernalia and over-sexualization. So we know this is clearly about content. It's very difficult under the First Amendment for the government to restrict content. So if the goal of this bill is to say we don't like the content you're getting, that's a very difficult thing for the government to do.
So if TikTok is...
So they're actively trying to take it's an issue of national security route because they literally can't take we have a problem with the content on this platform route because that goes against Americans' First Amendment rights. If the content on there is not illegal, it's just somewhat distasteful, like people celebrating smoking weed or whatever, then you can't really push that because people have the freedom to talk about smoking weed, right? So they argue that TikTok, because it collects data like any other website does or app like that does, and because it's owned by China and provides that data to China, the government, that somehow means that it is a unique danger to Americans. Mind you, the majority of data breaches tend to happen to American companies, right? Aren't you more likely as an American to have your private info jeopardized by an American company like Microsoft having a data breach? If Microsoft gets cucked, that full-on what's the word for it? That will, like, fuck you over. Like, that's your email. It's like all your stuff connected to your email and stuff. There's been tons of data breaches like that in the past where tons of passwords and info have leaked. So the idea that we're more in danger from TikTok, I don't really buy it.
Forced to
Sorry, I'm gonna
divest.
unmute you, Lucky
How does
Jenna.
that infringe upon one's First Amendment rights? Because if I want to post on TikTok, I can still post whatever I'm posting, no matter who owns it.
Sandbot
Well,
got you by mistake.
there's two things that could happen, right? One is that it will just shut down. It won't have a non-Chinese owner. That could happen. Then those who previously used the site and received information from it wouldn't get that anymore. If they're sold to a U.S. company or sold to other ownership, then that still may affect First Amendment rights because the new owners may have different editorial policies. In fact, it seems like, based on the comments of the sponsors gave on your show yesterday, is that they wanted to have different editorial policies. They wanted to show different content to U.S. users and to treat their content in different ways. So again, that's an infringement on the user's First Amendment rights. So what Congress wants is for them to get different information. They're doing that through having different ownership and different editorial policies. I think we've all seen what a change in ownership can mean for the editorial policies of a social media company and for users.
They're literally demanding that TikTok change hands in ownership or be banned. Like, it's the most bizarre attempt at, like, national strong-arming I've ever seen. Like, one of the few cases where it's like, I think the corporation is on the right side of this one and not the government. Like, it's a rare corporate dub over the government, but this is a case where the government is attacking a corporation to justify taking away our freedoms.
Experiences with it and whether they want to engage with that service.
You and your organization have called instead for
Probably not
comprehensive
Maurice
data
Bear.
privacy legislation.
It's,
how exactly
bipartisan
would that
support.
work, and how would that solve this TikTok problem?
So again, this really relies on if the problem is a data privacy problem, and this is what some people have said early on to justify the bill, a concern that too much U.S. user data was flowing to the Chinese government, and then that itself represented a national security concern. And we agree that the flow of U.S. user data is a serious problem, not just for national security reasons, but also for individual privacy purposes. But you address privacy concerns by passing privacy laws. What we do not have in the U.S. is...
In no universe would they respond to this problem by saying, you know what, let's pass a bill that restricts the legality of collecting user data on any social media site. And if TikTok doesn't follow those rules when they're here in America, for our American users, then we can ban them. Or punish them or fine them in some way. But no, that's not the goal of this. The goal of this is to create a precedent they can use for future control of the media consumption of Americans online. The company that made TikTok was in partnership with the Chinese military, then moved hands to be in partnership with the Chinese spy agency. What they want is to get the Chinese government out of that company? Absolutely. But like I said, the law itself creates a precedent that gives the sitting administration a lot of power over the media access online of Americans.
This comprehensive data privacy regulation that controls how much data companies can collect about their users in the first place, when, to the extent they can retain such data, and how they can share such data. If companies, TikTok or anybody else, were not collecting and retaining and sharing so much data in the first place, you wouldn't need to single out TikTok for such exceptional treatment. It's hard to take Congress seriously about data privacy if they don't pass data privacy laws, if they don't look at how TikTok and other social media companies retain user data, and if they don't look at how data brokers then purchase and then redistribute that data to lots of actors, including governments and including our our enemies.
They basically fooled people into thinking that because there is such a visible direct line for our data to go to foreign governments with TikTok, and because TikTok is already itself such an easy target for so many people who aren't like 16-year-olds and annoying, it's very easy to push this idea that TikTok is a unique danger. But the reality is that even Google, obviously Microsoft, fucking Twitter, Facebook, Meta, as they're called now, all these companies, they're collecting your data and they're selling it, and that data is getting tossed around between so many hands, it doesn't take long until governments have bought that data. The reality is that even through American companies, your data is ending up in the hands of some foreign governments that want it for whatever reason, and both parties here have convinced many Americans that there is a unique danger here, when the fact is this is just what happens when these corporations have the freedom to collect your data. Not just TikTok, not just companies that are owned by or in the hands of foreign spy agencies or whatever, but every company. Your data is not safe with them. The government has not passed laws that are up to date with the current state of the internet and the way that people use it. There are many things that are treated more severely than they probably should be online, while there are many things that should not be treated or need to be treated more severely than they are, because the internet's just not taken seriously. In some ways it's taken too seriously, and in some ways it's not taken seriously enough. This is an example of where, in a way, they're taking it too seriously, but they're also not taking the fact that so many of these companies do the same damn thing seriously enough. And I think they do know this. I think the fact is that, money in politics is a big problem, and that both sides of the aisle have that problem. The Republicans a lot more so, though. And so the fact is that many American companies, they have their hands in the pockets of one party or the other, and passing this bill for any other company, any other social media platform besides this one, TikTok, might not have gone as well as this ban has gone so far. It's passed Congress. I guess now it's in the Senate is where they're looking at it now. We'll see. Maybe it gets shot down. Maybe it doesn't. Regardless, this is going to be precedent setting in regards to Americans' rights to access content online. It's going to be a big precedent-setting case. Or I should say bill. It's not a legal case.